Hello and welcome to Archive West Texas. I'm your host, Gordon Wilkerson, joined today by our producer, Rachel Boyd. On this program, we focus on history, but we also look for inspiration from our guests. And today's guest will provide plenty of that. We're pleased today to welcome Sheila Patterson-Harris, daughter of one of the most influential public servants in Lubbock history, her father, the late T.J. Patterson. T.J. served as Lubbock's first African-American city councilman and devoted decades to public service, advocacy, and community leadership. We'll talk today about the Patterson family's journey to Lubbock, the founding of Southwest Digest, the Patterson family's remarkable legacy, and Sheila's own service to our city. Sheila, welcome to Archive West Texas.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, we're glad to have you. Let's start at the beginning. How'd the Patterson family first come to Lubbock?
Well, the Patterson family, as you know it now, came from two directions. One was not the Patterson, one was the Bailey family, which was my mom's family, and they had been here for a while. My great-grandmother, Sarah Crawford, and her family. During that time, African Americans or Black citizens moved around based on a cotton pick. We called it going for a cotton pick, going where the cotton needed to be picked so they could earn money and things like that. And so citizens kind of stayed once they got here for some reason and started developing what was to be the Black community. So not long after that, my great-grandmother came to Lubbock, Texas. And she was here. I helped raise my mom and my aunt. I have a couple uncles and another aunt. But my dad came later because a portion of his family, which was a part of the Barton family and the Graves, they were here. So he just came to Lubbock, going to come by and get this little sharp car and get on his way. But a young lady that he had kind of seen a story about, an article in one of the Paul Quinn newspaper, which is a HBCU. And my dad also attended Bishop College, which was an HBCU in Marshall, Texas. So he saw her in the newspaper because he wrote for the Bishop newspaper. And he's like, oh, that young lady's awesome. Came to Lubbock, ended up meeting her, and the rest is history.
There you go.
So there you go. That's the Patterson family.
What do you remember most vividly about growing up in Lubbock?
Oh, well, as children, we were both exposed but sheltered at the same time because of the time in which it was, the late 50s, early 60s. And so it's my sister who's the eldest, my brother, TJ Jr., and then myself. My sister's name is Avis. And so we were kind of sheltered because there was still some ugliness going on in this city. But we were exposed because my mom and dad wanted us to see what life was outside of our little area, our little community. So we went to different churches, different denominations, different faiths. We went to different activities and things of that nature. And so because my dad was busy little man, he was teaching at Mary and Mack, which was his aunt's private school, the aunt who had him come here to pick up that Plymouth Fury. Convertible, red. I'm saying that because that was a big tractor during that time. So he did that, and he worked for Norman Williamson on the West Texas Times. That began as the Manhattan Heights newspaper, which serves the Black community. And then West Texas Times, the same thing. And he soon learned, so much of the business, decided he embarked on his own on a journey of being a publisher.
How did your dad get so engaged in the community? Why was that important to him? What was the driving factor there?
My dad, who was raised by his stepdad and his mom, my dad watched his aunts and uncles on his mother's side. His mom was the baby of 18 children.
Wow.
And the story I've been told all of my life is that each one of those children, who, as they grew, they never worked for anyone else. They always worked for themselves. But during that time in the Black community, and specifically in the Barton family, you took care of each other. You looked after each other. So that became really big for him. And he watched this as a young boy growing up in a family that basically took him in. And also during his time as a young boy, he wasn't treated as well as he probably should have been as a Patterson because he was adopted into that family. So that kind of, I believe, gave him some feeling of, man, I want other people to feel loved and connected and cared for and know that you're fighting for them and being there for them. So my own opinion, I think that had a lot to do with it.
He talked about his background in journalism, working on the paper while he was in college, and
Yes, sir.
then having some experience with newspapers here. What led him to start the Southwest Digest?
He and his partner, Eddie P. Richardson, we called him Uncle Eddie P. And we would call him Daddy Rich also. While my dad was working with the West Texas Times, he just felt like there was more that needed to be done to inform and expose the Black community. So it was during the time he was working at Texas Tech for the College of Business that he had an epiphany and he and Eddie decided that they just embark on their own path. And so they did. As a matter of fact, my dad walked home from Texas Tech that day. He just left. He just quit and left. And my mom thought it was crazy. He came home to tell her that, baby, I'm not at Tech anymore. And Eddie and I are going to start our own newspaper. And they had $5 to their name is what I was told, what my dad told me. And it was rough. It was rough trying to sell, the Black newspaper to areas and businesses outside of the Black community. So he figured out, that he needed everybody's money to keep his newspaper going, to get the information out to the Black community.
How large was the circulation?
Ooh, see, I don't have those numbers. My sister Avis would know.
But
wow.
It was published for decades.
For about 42 years, I believe. Yes.
Published weekly, was it?
Or? It began being published weekly. The same rotation as the West Texas Times, because Norman decided he wasn't going to be there full time either. So it just kind of helped my dad push him further into deciding to do on his own. But I mean, there were customers, I'll say, our readers all the way to California, to New York, and all of that, because his reader base they received their papers by subscription. So people from all over who had lived in Lubbock, who had family in Lubbock, who once had family in Lubbock and didn't anymore, but wanted to keep up with their hometown, to see what was going on, or to be aware of the things that were taking place.
No, so he and Eddie write all the stories
and
take all the pictures and sell all the ads. And
they did. Starting off, they did all of that. It was a two-man show. And they did it. And I remember as a young girl when this happened, many of my friends sold the newspaper. They would come bi-weekly and they get there, start off with however many. They might start off with 50 papers. They'd go and sell those, bring that money back, cash out, and get more if they wanted to. So a lot of my little classmates, if you will, were selling newspapers for my dad. I remember one guy, I call him a gentleman now because he's my age, but one guy's name was Glenn Ransom. Boy, he would sell those papers. He'd take 50, he'd go sell them. He'd come back and get 50 more. He'd go sell them, bring the money back, get 50 more. Oh, he did. He earned a living, even though he was just a preteen, I'll say, an early teenager, that he really got after it. And people bought the paper. I think it was like 25 cents then or something like that when it started.
Well, probably had a prolific future in sales.
Yeah, I'm not sure what he's doing now, but I tell you what, he had a good foundation.
Sheila, TJ was the first African-American elected to the Lubbock City Council.
Yes, sir.
That was back, I think, in 1984.
Yes, sir.
So what motivated him? I mean, he sounds like a guy that when he makes up his mind, he walks home from Texas Tech, says, I'm going to start a newspaper. And then I would guess he walks home one day, tells your mom, I'm going to run for city council.
Yeah. I tell you what, was a determined guy. He didn't need anyone to motivate him. Once he saw a situation, he wanted to dive in head first. But prior to that, there were issues. He was not the first one to run. He was the first elected. The person who was the first Black individual to run for city council office was A.W. Wilson. He was a pastor in the Black community. As a matter of fact, he was my dad's pastor. And that's where he would go to church to court my mom. And there's a whole story behind that. But Reverend Wilson, A.W. Wilson ran first, but that was when all of the positions were at large. And of course, he didn't win, but he had the guts to get out there and put his name out there and take that chance. And sometimes that's all it takes to light a fire up under someone else.
That's a lot of courage in that day.
And even with regard to the positions being at large, that was a concern for so many of the citizens. There were some other things that had happened in the city where people were trying to break down barriers and whatnot, and it didn't happen. So the request to get representation in the Black community was one that they were willing to go all in. The first African-American attorney here in Lubbock that had practice was Gene Gaines. And he, along with Mark Hall, who's a white gentleman, he was an attorney here in town, and William O'Shea, and there was another attorney, and I cannot remember his name, but along with Rose Wilson, Miss Rose Wilson had to be in there somewhere. She and several other citizens, they thought they'd take this on. So they filed a lawsuit saying that Lubbock was discriminated. They were not allowing for representation for citizens. And as a result out of that lawsuit was won on their behalf. And as a result, you have single member districts. And so since, they fought for that to happen, they sure as heck better have someone to run in that position. And so that was T.J. Patterson. They were looking for someone, and he was willing to stand up and go in for the fight. And as a result of walking and talking with his citizens in the community in that district too, and ensuring that folks were registered to vote and that they voted, because you can have tons of folks registered to vote, and it doesn't mean a hill of beans if they don't vote.
True.
Yeah. So that happens a lot these days. Kind of digress just a little bit, but here in Lubbock, Texas, over 270,000 citizens, over 180,000 registered to vote. And the last election was decided by 10,000, less than 10,000. So it makes no never mind, I'll say, that you're registered. You have to vote.
Yeah.
And that's what happened.
If you don't vote, you don't have a right to complain.
That's my motto. Yeah. That's my motto. And ever since my brother and my sister and I were old enough to vote, my dad got us up or called us every morning and say, have you gone to vote? This was before early voting and everything. Have you gone to vote? Have you gone to vote? That happened up until the time that my dad passed away. He'd always check in with us to say, have you voted?
Have you gone to vote? When people talk about your dad, they say he definitely represented the District 2, but that he also represented the entire city. How do you balance advocating for his district while also building relationships across the community?
I think, and I'll kind of throw in a little how I felt about it, is that no matter where you were in the city, everybody wants basically the same thing. It's for their neighborhood to be well, for their community to be well. And when everybody's wanting that for their neighborhood and community, you want that for the whole city. So, and I think his idea was that if you make the city well, you can't help but have a little bit of that, or a whole lot is what you're desiring, to roll over into your district.
Yeah.
So, we're all a sum of our parts. The city is a sum of each of our parts. And if we have all our parts well, then our city is well.
Former Mayor Allen Henry described your dad as a gift to the city. What do you think made him such an effective coalition builder? He
just loved people. He wanted the best for everybody. All of my life, I was thinking back, talking with someone not long ago, saying, I never heard my dad say a negative word about anybody. It was always encouraging, or you just wait. They're going to come out of this and they're going to be better. You wait, you watch what I tell you. And he would say that often. And at the end of the day, you'd have to believe it, because on down the road, there were some good things that started happening for that individual. So he just knew that everything was possible. If in his life, he could make it out of the things that he had to deal with, surely everybody else could.
Yeah. Your father had a strong ministry to incarcerated individuals. He would visit inmates at Christmas for decades. What do you think that tradition revealed about his character and his worldview?
He believed that there was something good with everybody. He really did. As I watched him, as he would enter into the pods, they're pods now, but back then they were just floors, yet the floors where the inmates were in different areas. And he'd go in excited to see them and letting them know that he was excited to see them that morning and wanted to encourage them to get out of there and stay out. Do some things, start planning of doing some things that'll keep them from having to become the slave to that system.
Yeah.
And he just believed the best out of everyone, even though if someone got down. I'm telling you, he would always say, you watch and see, you watch what I tell you. They'll come out of this. They're going to come out of this. And as life would have it, so many of them would come out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was involved in so many efforts. I mean, he was involved in housing, youth advocacy, education, community development, founding of all kinds of organizations. Did he ever tell you which accomplishments mattered most to him personally?
I never heard him pick one over the other.
Right.
I think they were all important, that if you were able to make things well in one area, it couldn't but help to make it well in another area. He just enjoyed it all. I remember him being a Boy Scout leader and just some of everything. And like I said, the newspaper, working with those young men as they sold the papers. So just realizing that you just needed to give someone that big old word, that opportunity. You give someone the opportunity, that chances are they could take that opportunity and run with it, and not have a problem, and find themselves doing well and begin to encourage themselves and realize on their own that there were things that they could do. They did not have to stay down. They did not have to find themselves in a system that was not any good for them.
Yeah.
That they could do differently.
Your parents' names are permanently attached to the Patterson Library and also to the plaza in the new City Hall complex downtown. What did that recognition mean to your family?
Oh, wow. That happened with regard to the library. It happened while my parents were still alive.
Yeah.
And, I don't recall very much of anything being named, especially locally, about individuals that were still alive. So they were able to see that recognition and feel proud themselves. And we were proud for them. That people recognize. Number one, my mom was an educator. She retired after 43 years of being an educator. And my dad, he never retired. So just being able to see them recognized for the work that they put in and that they could see it as well, yeah.
When you think about your father's overall legacy, what do you hope younger generations remember about him?
Oh, that anything's possible, but you can't quit. He'd always say that. Don't quit, Sheila, don't quit. Don't give up, don't quit. Keep going. If you get knocked down, get back up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sheila, we've spent the first two segments talking about your family, how your dad got here, a little bit of a story about what'd you say, a red convertible Plymouth Fury?
Yes.
Let's shift and let's talk about your own service to the community.
Okay.
After watching your father serve for so many years, did you ever think about following in his footsteps and serving the community on your own?
In the capacity of a council member? Never in my life. However, I was involved in the community in different capacities, different organizations. I've always been a part of Lubbock Habitat. So I kind of had my own space, that I championed for. And it's because I was able to see how well it impacted families and folks in the community, young people in particular. So I had my own things that I did. But seeing my dad not stop, continuing to fight, even as he began to battle with some medical things, he still had hope that things in this city would improve, would get better. And not that they weren't taking positive steps, but there was always room for improvement, always spaces to trudge towards. So I had my own little things.
What ultimately moved the needle for you to say, okay, I can do this. I'm going to run for council?
I tell you what, some folks got in my ear and were asking me to run several years before I decided to. And my dad would always say, he'd call me, baby girl, you can do it. You can do it. The people need you. And I was like, Papa, I'm not trying to be on a council in this city. No. I saw all of the situations and incidents and all of that he had to contend with. And I was like, I was working full time at the time. And I was like, no, but I knew that I would be preparing to retire. All my life had said that I wanted to retire early enough so that I could enjoy retirement, because I watched as my mom developed illness and was not able to do all the things that she wanted to do because she worked so long. And I vowed that I would not do that I was going to retire early and enjoy my life and hopefully watch my kids begin to get married and have children so I'd have grandbabies. And that's what my eye was on. And my family continued to talk with me. We prayed about it. And I kind of loosened up some, and we continued to pray about it and, kind of loosened up some more. So I made plans to retire in December of 2015. In November of 2015, I decided that I would run for city council. And the Lord directed me to specific individuals to become a part of my campaign team. All women, mind you. Because I always say, if you want something done and you want it done right, you get you a woman to take lead. So that's what I did. And hey, I'll tell you that God led me to these individuals. So we can't argue with that. And they were awesome. And I felt like with them that we could push forward and maybe be able to get in place and do some things.
To your earlier point, public service today can be challenging, sometimes even divisive.
Yeah.
What lessons from your father helped guide you during your own time on the council?
To not tolerate anything less of working together and being devoted. You just had to not be willing to just settle for anything. You wanted the best at all situations. And I watched him always wanting to fight for the citizens, not for himself, not for the other council members or the mayor. He fought every step for the citizens that put him in place.
What progress have you seen in Lubbock over the years, particularly in East Lubbock, and opportunities for minority communities? And what work do we have still yet to do in that area?
We've got work to do in that we should not look past the idea that it doesn't matter what we have. There's always something we can do for someone else. We can't want for ourselves if we don't want that same thing for our brother and sister. We are our brother and sister's keeper. We are. And we have to be willing to give and stand and push for those things to happen no matter where the concern is. And I think as long as we're always looking in that fashion, the divisiveness will not be there. Or it lessens the possibility of the divisiveness being there. But we've got to make sure that we want to make this whole thing well for everybody. And if you're not looking at it that way, you're probably there for selfish gain or some type of benefit for someone within a certain group of people. And you can't, I don't know how people live like that and sleep like that. During council, there were a lot of votes and that I made that I voted to things down to help other neighborhoods. It wasn't my neighborhood, didn't matter. They were citizens of this city. And because they were citizens of this city who paid their tax dollars and desired certain things, I owed it to them to support them. Even if their own representative was not, I owed it to them. And so we just have to look at it as like, man, we've got to help each other. Yeah, I can put off some things that I want for a little bit so that I make sure Miss Nancy gets what she needs. Yeah. So that's been it.
What concerns you most about the future of the city?
That attitude goes away of us not being concerned about others.
What gives you most hope for the future?
That there's always a possibility that some folks can come around and realize that. Jesse Jackson used to say, keep hope alive. And you've got to. You've got to keep hope alive for yourself. Sometimes you got to be that hope for someone else or help to lead someone to that hope.
So if your dad were sitting here with us this morning, what do you think he'd be most proud of?
Well, I have to say that he'd be so proud of my being on the council during the time I was, because he'd tell me that all the time.
Yeah, I bet that's right.
My dad would sit and watch council meeting after council meeting after council meeting live on television. Then he'd go back when they would play it again, and he'd watch it again just to see how I was handling. And he'd call me and say, "Baby girl, you made a good decision," and stuff like that. So just knowing that I made him proud was huge for me. My dad was my first love. The first man I ever loved was my dad. And so he taught me how to treat other people and how to try to be that hope or lead someone to that hope. So.
Okay, if your dad were here and if he were offering advice to citizens of Lubbock today, especially the younger folks, what do you think he would say?
Oh my God, my dad had so many sayings. He'd first say to the young people to get off your gluteus maximus. That's what he'd say. You got to get in here and you got to get to work. You can't sit around and wait for someone else to do it. You've got to get involved. And God darn it, don't you quit. Don't quit.
There you go.
Yeah. I could hear him saying it now. Yeah.
All right, we've got a tradition on this show where we ask our guests to impart some words of wisdom on our listeners. What would you have to share with our audience today?
I'd pretty much have to share the same things that my dad did, because we have so many individuals of all ages, but primarily our younger people who just don't feel like it makes a difference if you get involved or if you don't, that it doesn't make a difference if you vote or if you don't vote. It doesn't make a difference, and it does. It makes a difference for each and every one of us to get involved and do something. To do something. My dad had this saying, like I said, he had 10,000. But anytime I end something, I always remind people that my dad would say, "Little threads of cotton makes mighty big rope."
Amen. Sheila, I see you brought a book with you today. Tell us about the book you're holding, Equal Opportunity Hero.
Yes, this was a book, The Life of My Dad, T.J. Thomas James, T.J. Patterson. It was written by Phil Price, and the foreword, of course, was done by my dad, but it takes you from the time my dad was a young boy battling polio and living in New Jersey at first. He went from Waxahachie, Texas, he and his mom, to New Jersey for a little bit of time, and then back down to Texas in Wichita Falls. Takes you from there, and it shows, the time of my dad coming to Lubbock and staying. He ended up getting that Plymouth Fury.
There's that Plymouth in there. If any of our listeners wanted to get a copy of this book, how could they do that?
I believe they're still can be printed through the Tech Press. Is what it is. Yes, right. I believe so. They can make that request.
Well, that's great. Lots of Lubbock history, lots of family history in there.
Yes.
And lots of great photos.
Love letters from my dad to my mom when he was in Vietnam.
Really?
Yeah, so just his life. Yeah.
Sheila, thank you for taking time today to share with our listeners the story of your family, your dad, his service, your own service. We appreciate everything that the Patterson family means to this community. And thank you for taking time to talk with us today.
Thank you so much for allowing me to share. It means a lot.
Thank you for listening today. Please join us again next week for another episode of Archive West Texas.